never imagined my life would be reduced to a transaction, yet somehow that's exactly where I found myself. My name is Layla Parker, and I'm 30 years old. Just a year ago I was sleeping on cold sidewalks, clutching a tattered coat against my body, as the city passed me by like I didn't exist. People would walk past me without so much as a glance, as though I was less than human, as though poverty stripped me not only of comfort, but of dignity. I had lost everything: my family, my stability, my hope. Drawing on scraps of paper with borrowed pencils was the only thing that kept me tethered to myself, the only proof that I still had some kind of soul left inside me. That's when he appeared, Henry Lewis, a man whose wealth and power were whispered about like legend. He was the kind of man who didn't stop at traffic lights because life itself seemed to bend for him, the kind of man who had everything but still wasn't satisfied. The night I met him, I had no idea how drastically my life was about to change, or how much pain and confusion would follow. He saw me crouched on the corner of the sidewalk sketching. Most people ignored me, but his eyes lingered. At first I thought he was just another arrogant rich man about to toss an insult or spare coin my way, but instead he rolled down his window and called me over. His tone was clipped, cold, commanding. It wasn't a request, it was an order. Something in his authority made me hesitate, but hunger and exhaustion pushed me forward. I climbed into that gleaming car, my heart pounding with both fear and curiosity. What he proposed to me in that dimly lit cafe still echoes in my mind. He wanted me to have a child for him. Not a family, not a relationship, just a child. His words were chilling. This is a contract, nothing more, no emotions, no strings attached. I'll pay you enough that you'll never worry about survival again. At first I laughed because what kind of man makes such an offer to a stranger? But when I looked into his eyes, I saw he wasn't joking. He was deadly serious. I wanted to scream at him to walk away and never look back. And yet there I was, alone, cold, desperate, with nothing to my name. His words twisted into my mind like a cruel temptation: comfort, stability, a new life. He knew I had nowhere else to go, and he was right. The choice he gave me was no choice at all. I signed the contract the next day. My hand shook as I put ink on the paper because I knew I was sealing my fate. Henry's mansion was like another world, one I had no place in. Chandeliers glittered above me, marble floors echoed beneath my steps, and every corner smelled of polished wealth. I had gone from sleeping on concrete to resting on silk sheets, but none of it felt real. I wasn't a guest, I wasn't family, I was a vessel. At first Henry kept his distance. He was a man who lived by control and calculation, a man who planned every breath like a chess move. He would glance at me only long enough to make sure I was healthy, then vanish back into his world of contracts and meetings. I told myself I didn't care, that this was all just business. But at night, lying awake in that cavernous suite, I felt the weight of what I had agreed to pressing down on me like a suffocating fog. Then came the sound. That day at the doctor's office, when the ultrasound filled the room with steady, rhythmic heartbeats, my chest clenched so tightly, I thought I would break. And then the doctor smiled and said the words that changed everything. "You're expecting twins. Twins." 2 lives growing inside me, 2 tiny heartbeats that tethered me to something greater than money, greater than contracts, greater than fear. I pressed my hand to my stomach, and tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. Henry stood beside me, silent and unmoving. But for the first time since I met him, his mask cracked. Awe flickered across his face, a raw, unguarded awe that made me wonder if perhaps beneath all his steel, there was a heart that could still feel. From that moment on, the lines blurred. He started appearing more often, asking questions he never used to ask. "Are you comfortable? Do you need anything?" He left gifts in my room, a sketchbook and pencils, as if he had remembered the part of me he first saw on the sidewalk. I wanted to hate him for what he had made me agree to, but those small gestures chipped away at my defenses. And yet the closer the months crept toward the birth, the heavier my heart became, because every flutter inside me reminded me of what I would soon have to give away. I would bring them into the world only to watch them slip from my arms into his. No contract could prepare me for the agony of that. Still, part of me couldn't stop hoping that maybe Henry wasn't as cold as he pretended, hoping that maybe these children could thaw something frozen inside him. But hope is dangerous. It has a way of breaking you when you least expect it. The weeks stretched into months, and with each passing day, the twins inside me grew stronger, while my own resolve grew weaker. I had convinced myself in the beginning that I could separate heart from duty, that this was a contract, a transaction, a survival pact between a broken woman and a man who thought he could purchase life like property. But nothing in me was prepared for the way I would feel when their tiny kicks rippled beneath my skin, when I lay awake in the silence of the mansion and whispered names I'd never dare speak aloud. Sometimes late at night I would find Henry standing at the doorway of my suite, his face shadowed, his eyes fixed on me as though I were both a puzzle and a mirror. He never stayed long, never said much, but there was something in his gaze that unsettled me. It was not desire, not the crude hunger of ownership, but something quieter, something conflicted, almost as if he was the one being haunted. Once when he noticed me sketching in the notebook he had given me, he stepped closer and asked, "What are you drawing?" My throat tightened. On the page was the outline of two tiny cribs side by side with little stars dangling above them. I shut the book quickly, but not before he saw. His jaw clenched, his voice low. "They'll never want for anything," he said almost defensively, as if he could feel my fear. I didn't answer. I just pressed my palm against my belly, silently promising my children something money could never buy: my love, my presence, my protection. By the 7th month, whispers began among the staff. They knew why I was there. I heard them gossip when they thought I was too far down the hall. "She was nothing, a beggar. Now she carries his heirs." Another voice, "She won't keep them. Everyone knows." Their words cut deeper than knives because each syllable echoed the truth I had tried to deny. The night before my labor began, I stood by the enormous window overlooking the city, watching the lights flicker like fragile stars. I wondered if my children would ever know who I really was. Would they know their mother was once a homeless woman, her life discarded like trash, her body bought as if it were a commodity? Or would Henry erase me, rewrite the story so they believed they had sprung from his world of marble and glass, with no shadow attached? When the pains began, they tore through me like waves crashing against rock. I screamed not just from the contractions, but from the terror of what came next. Nurses rushed, doctors surrounded me, and Henry stood at a distance, pale, stiff, clutching the doorframe, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Hours blurred into agony, until finally the cries came, two voices raw and new slicing through the air. The moment they placed those tiny bodies against my chest, I shattered. Their warmth, their weight, the way their fists curled instinctively into the fabric of my gown, it was too much. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "I love you. I love you both more than life." For those few minutes, the world melted away. There was no contract, no mansion, no Henry, just me and the children who had saved me from myself. But then they were gone, whisked into Henry's arms by the nurses, wrapped in silk blankets instead of the worn fabric I would have given them. He held them awkwardly, almost fearfully, as if they were treasures he hadn't expected to feel so fragile. And then I saw it, his expression shifting, eyes wide with something close to horror. I thought at first it was the shock of fatherhood, the weight of responsibility finally breaking through his polished armor, but then he whispered something to the doctor, urgent, shaken. The doctor's face paled. The room thickened with tension. I demanded to know what was wrong, but no one answered me. My body ached, my heart raced, and panic clawed at my throat. I tried to rise, but my legs gave out beneath me. Henry finally turned, his voice unsteady, his face drained of its usual control. "Layla, these children, they're not." His words faltered, unfinished, hanging heavy in the air. Not what he expected. My world tilted on its axis. The cries of my newborns filled the room, innocent and unknowing, while I stood on the edge of a truth that threatened to destroy everything. My blood ran cold at his words. The room seemed to shrink, the white walls pressing in as though they too were suffocating me. Not his. Not what he expected. The questions tore through my mind like knives, and yet no one offered me answers. The doctors avoided my gaze, the nurses busied themselves with unnecessary tasks, and Henry stood rigid, clutching one of the twins as if the child were both a miracle and a betrayal. "Tell me what you mean," I whispered, my voice raw from exhaustion and fear. My body trembled not just from the aftermath of birth, but from the terror of what his silence implied. Henry's eyes, usually so controlled and unreadable, flickered with something I had never seen before: fear. "They don't look like me," he muttered almost to himself. "Not at all." I stared at him, stunned. His words slammed into me harder than any insult, harder than the years of being invisible on the streets. "They're babies," I snapped, tears streaming down my face. "They've been in this world for minutes. How dare you?" My voice cracked, but he didn't respond. He turned to the doctor instead. "Test them, immediately." The doctor nodded reluctantly, as if he had no choice but to obey. And I felt myself break. These were my children, my blood, my heart, and yet already they were being reduced to numbers, to DNA strands, to proof or evidence in some cruel game of ownership. The hours after that blurred into a haze of dread. I lay in that hospital bed, empty and shaking, the echo of my children's cries gnawing at my soul. I begged the nurses to let me hold them again, but they shook their heads. "Orders," they said. "Orders from Henry." My womb still ached from carrying them, my arms still longed for their warmth. But I was treated like nothing more than a surrogate awaiting judgment. When Henry finally returned, his face was unreadable again, a mask drawn tight over whatever storm raged inside him. He stood at the foot of my bed, his voice low and even. "The results will come back in 48 hours. Until then, you'll stay here. Stay here." My voice rose in disbelief. "Henry, they're my children. You can't keep them from me." His gaze hardened. "They're mine, Layla. I paid for this. Don't forget the contract you signed." The word struck me like a slap. Contract, paid, vessel. Was that all I was? Was that all they were? Rage boiled beneath my grief. "No contract can buy motherhood," I whispered, my voice shaking. "No amount of money will ever erase the fact that they came from me." For a moment I thought I saw something break in his expression, a flicker of guilt, of shame. But then it vanished, swallowed by his endless need for control. He turned away, leaving me in the sterile silence, my heart pounding with fury and fear. The next 2 days were the longest of my life. I replayed every moment of the past 9 months. Every look Henry gave me, every word in that cursed contract. Doubt gnawed at me, cruel and relentless. What if they weren't his? What if something from my past, the life on the streets, the men who had tried to take from me when I was weakest, had somehow stained this new beginning? I pushed the thought away, but it clawed back at me, relentless. When the results finally came, Henry walked into my room holding a sealed envelope. His hands, steady as stone in the boardroom, trembled as he broke it open. His eyes scanned the page and then his shoulders sagged. He looked at me, his face pale, his voice hoarse. "They're mine," he whispered. Relief surged through me, so powerful it made me sob. But before I could speak, his voice hardened again. "But that doesn't change what you've done to me." "What I've done to you?" I choked out, stunned. "You've made me vulnerable," he said, his jaw tight. "For 9 months I thought I was in control. And now?" His voice broke for the briefest second. "Now I don't even know who I am around them. Around you." I stared at him, my tears drying into anger. "That's not my fault, Henry. That's what love does. That's what fatherhood does. You wanted children without strings, but life doesn't work that way. They're not commodities. They're not contracts. They're souls." For once, he had no answer. He stood there, silent, broken open, in a way I had never seen. And in that silence, I realized something powerful. Money could command, contracts could bind, but nothing could control the heart once it learned how to feel. The days after the DNA results should have been a turning point, but instead they became a battlefield of unspoken wars. Henry didn't keep me locked away anymore, but he also didn't let me hold the twins freely. He visited them often, cradling them with awkward arms, staring into their faces as if searching for pieces of himself reflected back. Sometimes I caught him whispering to them, his voice raw, almost pleading words I couldn't quite make out. I meanwhile was left adrift. The mansion that once felt like a gilded cage now felt like a haunted palace. Every corner echoed with the cries of my children, yet my arms remained empty. I had become a ghost in their lives before they even knew me. One evening I found Henry standing over their cribs, his hands clutching the railing so tightly, his knuckles whitened. His shoulders were tense, his jaw tight. I stepped into the room, heart pounding. "They need me, Henry," I said softly. "They need their mother." He didn't turn. "They need protection, stability, things you could never give them on the streets." His voice was cold, but it wavered. "I gave them life," I whispered fiercely. "I carried them when no one else would. I starved so they could grow. Don't you dare tell me I can't give them what they need." Finally, he turned to face me. His eyes were burning, but not with anger, with something deeper. Pain. Fear. "You don't understand," he said. "I made this arrangement to keep control. I thought I could have children without risking myself. And now..." His voice cracked. "Now I look at them and I feel everything. And it terrifies me." For the first time I saw not the millionaire who had bought my womb, but a man unraveling under the weight of his own humanity. I wanted to hate him. God, I wanted to cling to my fury. But something in me broke because I understood. I had lived in fear for years, fear of hunger, of abandonment, of being invisible. His fear was different, gilded in wealth, but fear nonetheless. Still, understanding didn't erase my rage. "You think you can own love," I spat. "You think you can sign a contract and dictate who matters? That's not how it works, Henry. These children don't care about your empire. They'll care about who holds them when they cry, who whispers them to sleep, who teaches them what love means." Silence stretched between us. He looked at me as if I had struck him, but not out of cruelty, out of truth. The weeks rolled on and slowly something shifted. He allowed me more time with the twins. First minutes, then hours. I fed them, rocked them, sang lullabies I had once whispered to myself on cold nights to keep from feeling alone. And each time Henry lingered at the door, his eyes unreadable but softer than before. One night, as the twins finally drifted to sleep, Henry sat across from me at the edge of the nursery. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "Do you regret it, signing the contract?" The question sliced through me. I looked down at the babies, their tiny chests rising and falling, and tears filled my eyes. "I regret the pain. I regret the loneliness. But them," I smiled through my tears. "Never. They are the only thing I will never regret." He looked away, his throat tightening. "I never thought someone like you could carry so much strength. Someone like me. A homeless woman. A beggar. A mother who had been invisible to the world until she carried what even the richest man couldn't buy: unconditional love." But life wasn't finished with us yet. One morning I awoke to hushed voices echoing down the hall. Henry was arguing with someone on the phone, his tone sharp, desperate. I crept closer, pressing my ear to the door. "They can't know," he hissed. "If the board finds out, if the press discovers..." He broke off, his voice lowering. "It would ruin me." My blood ran cold. What secret was he hiding now? What truth was so dangerous that even after all we had endured, he was still clinging to lies? I didn't know it then, but I was about to uncover a past buried so deep it would shatter everything. The contract, the fragile trust between us, and even the safety of my children. The truth came like a lightning strike, sudden and scorching. I discovered it that afternoon, while I was straightening the nursery, humming softly to the twins as they played with their rattles. A folder lay on the side table, one I hadn't noticed before. It was labeled simply "Private, Confidential." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were photographs, documents, and a series of emails that made my stomach twist into knots. Henry had hidden the fact that he wasn't alone in orchestrating the arrangement. There were partners, distant relatives, and board members. People who had treated the entire situation as a calculated gamble. Every wire transfer, every legal clause, every layer of that contract had been meticulously planned not by him alone, but by a network of people who saw children as property, contracts as leverage, and love as a tool. I felt my knees go weak. My arms shook, and the twins, sensing my tension, quieted immediately. Their tiny hands reached for mine, and I grasped them instinctively. Protect them. Always protect them. That became my single thought, the mantra I clutched like a lifeline. Henry entered the room, then his expression unreadable, his usual calm fractured. He stopped short when he saw me holding the folder, my knuckles, white eyes blazing. "Layla, you should have told me," I snapped. "All of it. The truth. Every hidden hand. Don't you see what could have happened to them?" He hesitated, swallowed hard, and finally said, "I wanted to protect you. I wanted to control the narrative, make sure you and the children were safe." Safe? I laughed bitterly, tears spilling down my face. "You mean controlled? You mean hidden? You mean I had no idea what was happening with my own children?" He ran a hand over his face, frustration and guilt battling in his features. "It's complicated. Everyone has motives, Layla. I didn't want to drag you into it, but you did," I cried. "You dragged me in every step of the way. You put us at risk, all while keeping us blind." The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. The twins clung to my legs, their tiny heads resting against me, unaware of the danger that had nearly engulfed them. I looked down at them, and for the first time I felt a clarity that cut through the fog of fear, rage, and despair. I would no longer be a pawn in someone else's game. I made my decision right there. My voice was steady, filled with the raw authority that only a mother can summon. No more secrets, no more control. I will not let anyone use my children as leverage. Not you, not them, not anyone. Henry's eyes widened, a mixture of shock, respect, and perhaps fear. "Layla, this isn't just about emotion. There are consequences. You don't know what you're stepping into." "I know enough," I said. "I know enough to protect them. I know enough to fight, and fight I would." I contacted Celeste, who had always been my quiet ally in the shadows, the one lawyer who had never underestimated me. Together we began to untangle the web of contracts, emails, and hidden motives. Every page we uncovered, every lie we exposed, strengthened the resolve within me. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer a vessel. I was their mother, their guardian, and their shield, against a world that saw them as numbers and papers. Weeks later, after legal battles, confrontations, and more than a few sleepless nights, the full truth came to light. The conspiracy that had entangled Henry, the board, and distant relatives was exposed. The children were safe, and the people who had sought to manipulate them for power and wealth were removed from influence. Henry, too, had to confront his failures, his arrogance, and the consequences of trying to control what could never truly be owned. I held my twins that night, their small bodies warm against my chest, and I whispered to them what I had never whispered to anyone else: "You are ours, not a contract, not a wager, not someone else's choice. You belong to us, and no one will ever take that away." For the first time in years, I felt whole. My body ached from carrying them. My heart ached from the memories of fear and abandonment, but it was an ache filled with truth, love, and victory. I had survived. I had protected them, and I had finally reclaimed my life from the shadows. The lesson I carried forward was clear. No matter the power of money, manipulation, or authority, the strength of a mother's love of truth, spoken boldly, can dismantle empires and expose hidden darkness. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it is a whisper, a single act, a refusal to bow. And sometimes that whisper is enough to change everything. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope. Subscribe to my channel for more emotional, true life inspired narratives, and leave a comment about a time you found courage in the shadows. Your voice matters, and it might be the light someone else needs today.